it's the off season though. We're college football guys first, and yeah, it kind of stinks. There's just nothing right now. The February signing period is not really a thing anymore. It's all early signing period, and I know Greg Sankey's talking about you know potentially moving the early signing period or doing some type of reform. That's something I've been very vocal about as well. So
Vocal in what way, Carter?
they need to get rid of the early signing period. And this is the number one take I have on any college football thing that I do that I get destroyed for, because a lot of people say, well, the early signing period is good because you get all these kids on campus and you get them for spring football. And that may or may not be a good thing, just depending on the player. But what I can tell you is not a good thing is when coaches get fired and hired right at the beginning of December, and then in 10 days you got to fill a class or get everybody back on board. Well, the school that loses the coach has a lot of work to do to hire somebody before the early signing period begins. So these schools that spend millions and millions of dollars, the most important person is your head coach. You have to do these 5 to 10 day head coaching searches, and there's just so much behind the scenes from personnel people that I've spoken to at the college level that turns that beginning of December into pure chaos. And it's unfair to not only, the coaches, but it's unfair to the players, right? If you're committed to a school for as long as you've been committed to them and your coach decides to go elsewhere, or they get fired or whatever the case may be, you've got to scramble really quickly to make a choice. Hey, am I sticking with the school? Am I following the coach? It's a mess. So I miss the February signing period where, it's after the national championship game. We don't have situations where coaches have to bolt from their current school to another school. I just think the early signing period is not necessarily a disaster. I just don't think it's good. And I think there are ways to work around it.
So everything that you just said makes total sense, and I'm even going to add some to it. And
Yeah.
you kind of alluded to this, that I've heard this from coaches, both assistant coaches and head coaches. December is beyond ridiculous. They are slammed. So your team plays or doesn't play in a conference championship game the first weekend of December. Regardless, you're preparing a team for a bowl game. So we've got 40 some bowl games. We've got 2/3 to 3/5 of college football. Most of college football is preparing for a bowl game. So you gotta, and then we've got early enrollees who are now eligible to practice. They are, many of them are able. So you're trying to onboard 8 or 10 players, get them set with the college life, with acclimating them to the team. So you're doing all this that is still within the season, and then you're trying to hustle toward that, what is roughly December 15th deadline, to get these guys signed. And then you bring up the whole issue of you lose a head coach, and that new coach gets hired within the first 5 days, which is an enormous process unto itself.
Right.
To go out and get a major college football coach, that's that's an enormous decision.
Yeah.
And once you get him in play, he's like, take Dan Lanning. He's ingrained in the Southeast. That's what, and then all of a sudden he's in Eugene, Oregon. He's trying to coach a defense for a national championship run and recruit in a completely different part of the country,
Right.
and trying to pull together. And what is recruiting? Recruiting is about building relationships. And you got a new coach who's trying to maintain a class of 22 athletes. And he may have had connections with a handful of those 22 or 24 players, but most of them just trying to say, hey, this is why you should still come to Oregon or come to wherever. It's a daunting task.
It's brutal. And you saw some bowl games turn out the way that it turned out because, like, let's take Florida, for instance. Some random bowl in Vegas versus Oregon State means nothing to your future. And you had opt-outs, you had all of that, and they were the worst team this bowl cycle. And Baylor, same thing happened. Should Dave Aranda be more focused on the bowl game, or should he be more focused on the recruiting class? I think most Baylor fans would say the recruiting class for next year for sure. So it's a mess, and I really do hate it, because in the middle of it, you got all these opt-outs, you got so many things happening. I don't know what the best case scenario would be for everyone involved. I don't know if you move the early signing period earlier or whatever, but like you said, December is just a mess, right? And I just wish we could have a season where we don't have to worry about recruiting. And then, February used to just be this huge recruiting month, and we don't have this dead cycle. I mean, I know the portal is still lit for grad transfer guys, but still, it's a very crazy process.